Hashtag the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Hashtag exploration. The theme of the novel revolves around the saying that hashtag not all questions can be answered, which results in the humans or creatures of the book having to explore the unknown and step out of their comfort zone to achieve the answers they are in search for. For example, Zaphod Beeblebrox is a component that adds on to this theme because he has many questions such as why and who messed up his brain. The initials ZB that are marked on his brain is another component to the theme because it continues the search for answers.
Hashtag exploration is one of the universal concepts as Arthur now is required to recognize new languages in a brand new environment. Arthur doesn't exactly know what he's looking for, hashtag clueless, but continues to stumble upon new planets and symbols every so often.
Like hashtag 42. What is the significance of this number if we take in mind that there really is no real answer to life?
Talking about hashtag 42, what about hashtag mice? Or hashtag the Vogons, humans and police, and other creatures that arose in the novel. The main hashtag social issue rested amongst these groups in society as hashtag no one group got along. For instance, when the Earth went hashtag boom, a huge conflict arose between the Vogons and the humans because of a demand for a bypass. Another social issue revolves around hashtag Marvin, who is hashtag always depressed. Marvin represents a huge social issue in today's society because nowadays everyone is complaining about being in a state of depression.
This leads into hashtag community. Throughout the novel, Arthur Dent is introduced to different types of members of society, such as Zaphod, Marvin, Trillian, and Ford. After Earth is destroyed, these members share a common goal to find the answer to the universe. Despite the issues that Arthur has against Zaphod, he is able to keep his hashtag cool and embrace on a journey with him. However, when this group comes in contact with the mice, a sudden change occurs and the hunt is shifted to Arthur's hashtag brain.
Hashtag change always occurs throughout the novel, especially with Arthur Dent. Dent's entire world changes for the worse or for the better. It is left for the reader to decide. Despite him losing the world as he knows it, he is able to make it a positive when he gets stuck with Ford Prefect. Because of this instantaneous change, Dent is able to grow and learn the ways of space.
With change also comes hashtag adaptation. Over the course of the novel, Arthur has to adapt to not only new languages, new environments, and talking mice, but also has to learn a new way of life and carrying around a hashtag towel. He no longer has a hashtag pub or has to worry about hashtag yellow bulldozers, but now has to worry about escaping to the police and surviving in an abnormal galaxy. Another example of adaptation is hashtag Trillian, who like Arthur is a human. However, unlike Arthur, Trillian easily adapts to change, hence the change in her name from hashtag Trisha McMillian to Trillian.
Talking about yellow bulldozers, the day Mr. Prosser arrived at Arthur's house with hopes to tear it down, Arthur described him by saying he had the stench of blood. Blood symbolizes hashtag death, which contributes to the fact that everyone died that Thursday, hashtag rest in peace. Also, the narrator writes, on Thursday, the sun was out and shined on Arthur's house for what had to be the last time. This is hashtag foreshadowing also because it is hinting that something is coming.
Hashtag symbolism. On page 11, Ford Prefect said that he was always on the eye out for green, flying saucers. Hashtag green symbolizes hashtag change, growth, new life. Ford was somewhat hashtag foreshadowing that the world was about to change. Hashtag the heart of gold. This is the name of the ship that picks up hitchhikers as it is traveling to space. Hashtag gold symbolizes success, achievement, triumph. This meant that the group was going to be triumphant in landing on Magrathea.
Going back to Mr. Prosser, the narrator relates him to hashtag Genghis Khan, who was a famous Mongolian conqueror who had a desire to hang axes from his dream home. This hashtag illusion is made because Mr. Prosser has a hashtag desire to hashtag destroy Arthur's house.
Hashtag personification. The narrator says the only thing that the petunias thought as they fell was, oh no, not again. Hashtag petunias cannot hashtag speak. Hashtag Marvin is another example of personification because hashtag robots cannot speak either.
Now if all this hashtag drama occurred throughout the novel, hashtag the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, what would have happened if Earth has hashtag never been destroyed? Would the mice have abandoned their experiment? Hashtag the world may never know.